Want to learn how the tax sale works? In today's video, I'm going to show you the exact steps to find, bid, and win those properties at tax sale. I'm going to show you actual properties bid at tax sale. I'll even show you one that I bought a whole house for $275. I'm going to show you how to get lists for free anytime you want them of properties going up for tax sale. I'm going to show you the ways that you're going to win at these tax sales and warn you off on the risks that can come completely out of the blue if you don't know what you're doing, because tax sales are not for the uninformed, but they are for those who want to get informed and make big profits. And be sure to stay on to the end, because at the end, I'm going to give you access to a free resource where you can learn a completely unique way for getting tax sale properties with no competition, where properties are bought free and clear, sometimes for just a few $1,000s. At tax deed sales, they sell real estate that's 3 to 4 years behind in taxes. And the bidding starts at the amount of taxes. So for most properties, the real estate tax bill is about 2% of the home value per year. So if you're talking about average house in America, about $400,000, the tax bill is about $8,000 per year. They're going to start that bidding at a little over $30,000 on a $400,000 house. And of course, there are plenty of properties that are less expensive properties that are available and properties that are more expensive. Take a look at this house. This house I bought at the tax sale auction in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania for $275. Now it needed work, but it was still a house for $275. That place was fixed up, took about $30,000 to do that, and sold for $60,000 right away, just like that. That's the kind of thing you can do at tax sale. Again, they come in all kinds of price ranges. The property you're seeing on your screen on Christensen Lane in Castro Valley, California, well, that sold for $559,000 at tax sale and was resold later that same very year for $1.2 million. So there's some amazing deals at these sales, and usually the properties do need work, but you look at that property bought for $500,000. It's not a very large property, and you're not going to spend $500,000 fixing it up. So there can be a lot of money in these deals, but you have to know what you're doing to get these properties safely and to actually make money with it. So let's start with how you're going to get the list of tax sale properties. Well, that's easy. You're going to do a Google search, which the format is like XYZ county and state. So for example, here's a search: DeKalb County, Georgia tax sale list. And what's going to pop up? Well, the list that you see on your screen is going to pop up. Those are properties that are scheduled for tax sale. And you can see it shows the address of the property, the current owner's name, and most importantly, the amount of taxes that are due. And that's what the bidding is going to start at. And look how inexpensive those starting bids are. Very cheap, right? That's why there are bargains available, because the bidding is starting so low. And the first bidder that bids above that, whoever wins in the end is going to get it, meaning the county's not going to say to you, well, we think the property is really worth 100, so you have to give 50. No, no, no. As soon as the taxes are taken care of, whoever the highest bidder is just wins. So when you're at those auctions, sometimes you're going to get absolutely amazing deals. So once you get your list, your next step is to start screening the list to decide which properties you're interested in. Because one of the tricks that you have to know about in this business is that there are a lot of useless properties that are sold at tax sale. These are little strips of land that are just actually from a surveyor's error. Sometimes they're underwater parcels of land that, the title flow changed or river changed, and all of a sudden the property is not buildable anymore. So there are a lot of useless properties. So you really need to check out each property that you're going to bid on. And your first step is very simple. You just go on Google Street View, and you're going to put in the address of the property, and it will pull up pictures of the property that are being offered for sale. Now, if you take a look on Google Street View, you'll notice that it says when the photograph was taken. And if you look even more carefully, you can see you can actually go back a couple generations. So you want to make sure that the photo that you're looking at is fairly recent. Although at this stage, you're just really screening for which ones you're interested in pursuing further versus not. Looking to see if there's actually a building on the property, looking to see if it's just scrub land, looks like it's the end of a cliff, whatever it might be. That's your first step. You should go through the whole list with that and just pick out the properties you're interested in. And then the next step is going to surprise you. The next step is really to do nothing. The reason for that is that although these lists are very large when they start out, People are going to pay off their taxes at the last minute, and they're going to file bankruptcy at the last minute to avoid their property being lost at a tax sale. So a list that may have 1,000 properties to start out with is probably going to be down to 250 properties by the time the tax sale comes, or even less. So you don't want to spend too much time driving around looking at properties or doing due diligence when most of the time the property will not actually be sold at the sale. That being said, there are properties that will be sold and there are some amazing deals, but you have to have a lot of properties that you're looking at kind of in your funnel, and a few of those are going to end up being opportunities to buy at the sale. So you really want to do your next step in due diligence 3 or 4 days before the sale and leading up to the sale. Your next step is going to be drive around and look at the properties. So what you do is you look at the list again 3 or 4 days out and you see what's still left. And you say, all right, of what's still left, which ones was I interested in? And then those properties, you actually go drive by the properties. Here's another surprising thing. There's no open house. There's no opportunity to see the inside of the property. So you've got to look at the property from the street. So what you do is you're going to pull up, you're going to take some notes about the property, like for example, does it appear occupied or abandoned? Look to see if there's any sign of, say, a fire. Like look under the eaves to see if there's any blackening from smoke or any holes in the roof. You want to look at that so that you can get a guess of its condition. Now just assume the worst, because if you buy this, you're going to have to do the repairs. So kind of assume the worst. And generally these properties that are being lost at tax sale, people don't have the money for maintenance if they don't have the money to pay their taxes. So assume that roofs are leaking and it's messy inside. So you really have to take a conservative approach, because I'd rather that you miss a couple deals rather than buy ones that turn out to be bad deals. So just assume it's got problems. Look around at the neighborhood and say, is this someplace I'd be interested in? Oh, that was one thing I meant to include earlier. When you're looking on Google Street View, just turn the Street View around and take a look to see what the neighborhood is like and see if it's a neighborhood you want to operate in. So anyway, you're at the property, take some notes down about it. And if you're feeling bold, you can get out of the car and go knock on the door, see if anybody's there. If there's a neighbor, you can talk to them. If you're going to go up to the door, which is a good idea, if you're going to go up to the door, peek in the windows as best you can. I mean, don't be walking around the house like looking at every window, but whatever you can view as you're walking up to the house, do that. You want to see if there's a ceiling that's caved in from flooding. You also want to get an assessment. Is this occupied? Occupied has two things to it. Occupied is good, and that the house probably hasn't frozen and it's gotten a bunch of broken pipes, which in northern climates is a concern. But you also have to deal with the occupants once you own the property, and that can be expensive and something you have to do. So that's something sort of a consideration, I would say. I know some buyers will only buy vacant properties. Other people, like me, for example, I'll deal with the occupants. I go and talk to them and see what I can do with them. But that's up to you. And do realize when you have an occupant, it's up to you to deal with them. The auctioneer does not deliver a property that's free and clear of occupants. It's up to you to deal with that. So you have to make a budget and time for that. So generally, you're going to plan for what's called an ejectment action, which means that you file in court through a lawyer. It's like a fancy eviction, but in common pleas court, or the higher level court. You have to do an ejectment action, assume 4 to 6 months to do that, and then you have to pay a mover to get people out of there. So it can be expensive. If I were buying an occupied house, I'd assume an extra $10,000 to $12,000 in costs to get them out of the house. Now, oftentimes people go afterwards, they offer some cash for keys and things like that. That's something for another video at another time. But just realize when it's an occupied house, the benefit is it's probably in a little better condition. The downside is that you have an occupant to deal with. And by the way, in this entire world of tax sales, you have to deal with things like this. This is not buying through a realtor where everything's nice and easy. You do get great bargains, but you do have to do work to deserve and get those bargains. So your next step is to prepare for the auction. And when you're getting the list, you should also be getting the terms and conditions of sale. Many sales these days require pre-registration. What that means is that before the sale, you've got to register. Usually have to do a certification that you're not behind in other real estate taxes. You don't have a bunch of like zoning code violations. You can see that where you get the list, you'll see if there's a form to fill in to qualify for the sale. Sales are held both online and in person. Benefits, in person, you have to go down there, which is kind of a nuisance, but there are less bidders. When it's online and anybody can participate, then there are going to be more bidders, so it's more competitive. So if I had a choice, I'd rather go to an in-person auction because there are going to be better deals there. In an online auction, anybody can participate. They do get more participation, and more bidders, so you're going to get better deals at the in-person auction. All that being said, despite the complications of, you get a big list and only a few are sold, you have to deal with occupants, you don't know the condition, you don't get to have a home inspection or anything like that. Despite that, the prices can really make up for this. Literally, properties can be bought for pennies on the dollar. I showed you the property I bought on Stanbridge Street in Norristown, Pennsylvania for $275. You saw the property in Christensen Lane bought basically for half price. There are lots of great properties sold. Here's another one in Groudon Terrace in Maryland that was sold at tax sale. These are all great deals, and there can be some very nice properties. Of course, there'll be a lot of junkers too. So you need to go in having done your due diligence, which means driving by every property before you'd ever buy it. And you just need to do that at the last minute because that's the only way you can do it efficiently. These lists are very large. Like, for example, the list in Baltimore County, Maryland is like 30,000 properties. So you have to wait till the end when the list has come down, and that's when you're going to be driving the properties. If I were working in a place in Maryland, which I have bought properties there before, I just pick little sections of town, and then I can very efficiently see them in the 2 or 3 days before the auction. Obviously, you can't cover 30,000 properties. It's impossible. But that gives you an idea of the scope of this opportunity. It's a very large opportunity. The other thing I'll tell you about these sales is that they have gotten competitive, especially when they're available online. So you get a lot of bidders. People are bidding properties up. Sometimes people just get too excited at the auction. When you're at the auction, set your high number. Meaning set whatever the maximum you would bid, and when someone exceeds it, just sit down. Don't go and just say, well, it's only an extra $100. It's only an extra $1,000. The point of buying these properties is not to get a property. You could do that through a real estate agent 7 days a week. The point is to get a property at the right price. And we have other things we need to compensate for here. Like, we don't know the exact condition. We have maybe an occupant to deal with. So there are all kinds of things to deal with. So only get these properties if they're a great deal. That being said, I have a friend of mine who is a real innovator in the space. He's been buying properties since the 1990s at tax sales. And he came up with this proprietary method that when I saw it and he showed it to me, I was amazed. And I say that because he found a way to buy properties at tax sale where you have no competition at all. Properties can be bought for only the taxes due, so the pricing is much lower. And it's truly an amazing innovation. And I sat down with him recently and we talked about tax sales and about his method. And you're not going to believe the things. He was showing me properties that he bought for $2,000 and $3,000 that were rented properties where he could pay for the entire property just by leaving the tenant in there in 3 or 4 months. It's absolutely crazy. And he's built a big portfolio and been fabulously successful with this really innovative way of doing it. I like his way of doing it better than what I was describing to. What I'm describing to is the standard way to do it. You can go do that, go do it all day. But my friend came up with something that's really, really interesting. It's basically no competition purchase at the lowest possible price. I think it's a really great thing to look into. So what I want you to do, I hope that this was helpful where I gave you the outline of what to do, which is get the list, look on Google Street View, and then drive the properties at the end. That's all fine, but I wanted you to see this other method also. So I sat down with my friend. We did a short interview. It's about 25 minutes long. He really goes into the details, and you're really going to love this because if you're looking at tax sales, you have to look at my friend's method because I really think it's better. So if you click the link, that'll take you to that video. You're going to love this conversation. I did. When he was showing me the stuff he was doing, again, I'm just so excited because he really is an innovator, and he can do this all over the country. Guy really knows his stuff. Again, he's been doing it since the 1990s, so he is the guy to learn from, world-class expert. So next step, click on that free video, go watch the interview, and you're going to learn something entirely new, a novel way of doing this that is absolutely the most profitable way because you're going to be buying properties free and clear of mortgages for only the taxes due with no competition. It's amazing. So click on that link, and I'll see you over there.